At age 6, Catherine Spallino is separated from her parents and sent to train for her future in the Church of Scientology's clergy, the Sea Organization. Naively happy at first, she thinks it's a fun adventure to live in a Scientology-owned dorm room in Los Angeles with 13 other girls, rarely seeing her parents and never going to a normal school. She's committed to her Scientology studies and her life's purpose of clearing the planet. Later, Catherine is sent to live at a secluded ranch with other young prospective Sea Org members called Cadets, where she studies Scientology and does manual labour, weeding fields, digging trenches, and working in the galley. The indoctrination escalates and her family slip even further into the background. But as she enters her teenage years, a host of new, more immediate concerns emerge, namely boys, popularity, fits of rebellion, and fantasies of what else life has to offer. Hello listeners, and welcome to this week's mini-series with author of the brilliant memoir, The Bad Cadet, Growing Up in the Church of Scientology's Sea Organization. Before reading Catherine's book and speaking with her for this episode, I had no idea of Scientology's Cadet Org or the experiences of children sent to this regimented section of Scientology's oppressive makeup. It was such a privilege to sit down with Catherine and discuss her writing, experiences, and plans for the future. I hope you each enjoyed this chat as much as I did. Thank you so much for taking your time to chat with me, Catherine. Without further ado, here is Catherine Spallino. So hello, Catherine, and welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining me today. I've been really looking forward to this conversation ever since we were introduced by our mutual good friend, John Atack, and especially after reading your brilliant memoir, The Bad Cadet. Would you like to start by introducing yourself to the listeners?
Yes, I would love to. Thank you so much, Casey. I'm so excited to be here. I'm Catherine. I wrote a book called The Bad Cadet about growing up in the Church of Scientology Sea Organization. And I'm so glad that you read the book because it's way more exciting if the interviewer has actual questions for my book. So I'm so excited to talk with you.
The idea of writing a book from the perspective of a childhood in the Scientology, in the Church of Scientology, especially the Sea Org, must have been so difficult when it comes to all of the acronyms and the loaded language that the Scientology uses. And you did such an excellent job of allowing the book to be accessible for people that haven't necessarily lived in that environment or understand Scientology to a point where you would know what those acronyms mean. So I just wanted to first of all express my gratitude in making the book so reader friendly for people that know about Scientology but not to that depth. You broke down every acronym, every training program, every piece of uniform, every weird term that Scientology has for so many different things. And it was a thoroughly enjoyable read from start to finish. And I'm really looking forward to breaking down all of the parts of the book that stood out to me. But starting way back at the beginning, you've already mentioned that you grew up in the Sea Org. How was it that your parents were introduced to Scientology?
So I asked my parents this after I had left the Sea Org and was no longer a Scientologist because I was curious myself. And it turns out my mother grew up in a Pentecostal household. Her dad was a Pentecostal reverend, so super strict household. She didn't have a lot of choices to make, was very restricted, and then managed to leave. She was born in Puerto Rico, but they emigrated to, or not emigrated because they're citizens, but they went to New York, and then she managed to get her master, like left her house by 18 and went to college, got her master's in teaching. And I'm like so impressed when she's telling me all this. And then she ran into a old friend who had the book Dianetics. And she said she read the book, which I found interesting because I cannot read that book for the life of me. It's so dense. And she said it gave her freedom of thought. And she joined and she was so into it. And that's where she met my dad, who was her supervisor, which is the term for like kind of the guy who watches over while you're studying L. Ron Hubbard writings, and yeah. And so that's how she joined, because she thought it was the freedom of thought, and I just find that so ironic. uh,
It's really interesting to think about that with an understanding of cults, Pentecostalism, and Scientology. Dianetics on paper and not necessarily in practice in the environment of Scientology maybe presents itself as being freer than a Pentecostal environment. I don't know
mhm.
if that's true or if you have any insight into whether that is kind of along the right lines.
I mean, I think that how Dianetics first is presented to anybody in and they kind of moved away from saying Dianetics and go to Scientology by the time it was the 80s and 90s, but it's always about know what you know. What's true for you is true for you. It's all about you. You're the individual. You could empower yourself. But then at the more deeper you get into Scientology, the more anytime you question anything, there's something wrong with you, not the writings of L. Ron Hubbard. But it's so subtle and so insidious that you don't realize it, and then you begin people who are in Scientology monitor their own self-thoughts, like their thoughts are monitored. If they think something negative, they think that they did something wrong, because there's actual things like, if you don't understand this, there's a word you don't understand. So it's like, so everything comes back to you, and all of a sudden you're not actually thinking for yourself, which is wild.
It's like a psychological prison, but for your own thoughts and feelings.
Yeah.
And that's such a difficult thing to unpack. And I wonder how it was that your father was introduced to the group, the movement, the church, the cult.
Right. I actually don't remember how my dad got in. And my dad and I, he is featured in my book, but very little, because I didn't really have a relationship with him. He was just the guy who was my dad. But like I didn't really know him. And I think, I don't know. I feel like I might have had that conversation. I don't even remember it, which is sad. But I don't, and I feel like I had more conversations with my mother. So I don't know how he got in.
And you are born into the Church of Scientology along with your siblings.
Hmm.
There's a rule in the Sea Org that the you can't have children. So your parents were not in the Sea Org when this happened, or was this rule later introduced?
So it was later introduced. There was all these children now, and they're having to make schools in Los Angeles, and it was very chaotic schools. It wasn't well run, and I think somebody high up was like, "This is too much of a nuisance. No more children." Here's they put like a policy order out, and they said no more children are allowed. And it was 1984, or it was like so it was like 1989. I'm sorry, around there. I was already born at that point. I was the fourth of four kids. So, I grew up believing I can never have children, which is a wild thought. And like you read it in the book as I begin to wonder about that. Will they ever change that rule? Because I want to have kids.
It's a touching part in that book when you speak to your mum about potentially leaving the Sea Org because you want to have children, and then your mum could have grandchildren. And it's interesting because sometimes when these discussions between children and parents happen within these high controlling environments, there's often righteous anger or disappointment. But your mom never really, from the book's perspective, expressed that. She was always kind of like, "Oh, Catherine, you're in trouble again. I'm going to give you a hug. We're going to go back to what we were doing." But it was kind of like maybe you felt some of that in person, but in the book it always came across that your mom was just always kind of endearing in those short exchanges that you were able to have.
Yeah, I love that that came across, because yeah, my mom is a very sweet woman. Like I love her so much. And even to this day, even though she chose to not have me in her life, like I love her. Like I want to try to get her out. I'm trying to figure that out. It's hard because she has to want to leave, and I don't have contact with her, but we're, it's just, she has that spirit of a kind person. So even when I was like messing up all the time, hence the bad cadet, she was always just like, yeah, she could be disappointed, but you know, she was also like understanding in a way. Like, I didn't feel like she was judging me, which is amazing. I think I disappointed her, and I'd feel bad about that, but I never felt like she was, like, mad at me or hated me or something for that,
Yeah, yeah. Not
which
like
is
some of the
impressive.
other adults as you were
Yeah.
growing up, and their expressions and their verbalizations towards you as your rebellious streak grew in nature, which is my favorite theme throughout the book. Just this gradual growth in your rebellion. It's an incredible thing, especially as you work your way through to the end. And something I didn't realize until reading The Bad Cadet was just how regimented and structured the organization is from the generation that you came from as someone born and raised through the different ranks before you got to the Sea Org. So I wondered if you could just talk the listeners through what that setup looks like and what the children in your peer group and your age group would have been expected to go through before reaching this point where you can join the Sea Org if you're allowed to, in air quotes, if you're invited to or selected.
Yeah, it is just wild that they managed to, all of us children from the time we were 5, 6 years old knew we were gonna join the Sea Org. That was our purpose. So there was no like, I'm gonna be a doctor. I'm gonna be a veterinarian. Like this is our goal is just to be in the Sea Org. And from the time when I was 8 years old. Turns out it was actually 9, but that that's later in the book. But I didn't know my age, and that's another just part of life because I didn't have parents around. I was separated from my parents, so me and my friends we get sent to what's called the Cadet org, and it is regimented. There's a commanding officer who is a cadet. He's about 13 to 14 years old, or she. It would vary. And then we all have are assigned jobs, which are called post. It's very military like everything we muster up. We are at attention. We do dress right dress. It is very, we all know where we're supposed to be. There's a schedule that we follow, and that's just how our life is. And it turns out it's a mini Sea Org. We're basically already being in the Sea Org, but we're at a very young age. And they would incorporate some school. So like in the morning could be Scientology studies. So we're studying L. Ron Hubbard technology, but written for children. And then we would have in the afternoon, we would do what's called 3 R's, which was reading, writing, and arithmetic. And then either before or in the evening, like it depended on what time your schedule was, you had your post, which was like you could be a deckhand, which would mean instead of being on a ship, though, we're on land, we would be de-weeding the hillside, or you'd be in the galley cooking. So we'd all have jobs that we'd have to follow. So at a young age, we were used to considering ourselves adults in small bodies and that we were capable of doing pretty much anything that an adult can do.
So much of this comes across in an excellent way in the book and gives credence to a lot of themes that often come through in cult-like environments. The first one that really stood out to me was the situation where you are in a kitchen and you are doing adult-like jobs. There's a ton of manual labor in this book. Children just doing things that children shouldn't be doing in very dangerous situations, like cesspools and cesspits and all sorts of horrible things. But there's one instance where you seriously burn yourself, and there's a lot of talk on whether you're going to get medical attention or whether you're not going to get medical attention. There was a situation where you couldn't see properly for a really long time until people realized that you needed glasses. So there was kind of like a small theme of medical neglect that felt like it was present throughout your writing. And I just wondered if that was typical for Scientology, for children in Scientology to have uh, less access than someone like myself would have had with needing like the dentist, the opticians, a doctor, a specialist.
Yeah, it is very normal for them to neglect medical needs, and it gets even worse when I'm in the Sea Org. It's not in my book, but there's a point where I maybe reference it in like a sentence or two, but like I have a ripped contact lens and I cannot get new contacts. I keep writing, it's called a CSW, but it's a request for new contacts. This is a basic need and it keeps getting disapproved because they don't have enough money, which is wild when you think about it, because the Church of Scientology has so much money, but every organization when I was in the Sea Org is always broke because they pay, it's like a pyramid scheme. They have to pay most of that money up lines to the international org. So, and I didn't know that. I just thought we didn't have enough publican paying for services, but we do. It's just a lot of that money had to go up to up lines. And even at the ranch, they wouldn't get paid. Orgs wouldn't pay for the kids at the ranch. They would have to pay a certain amount per kid if they're how depending which staff have children. And they wouldn't pay, we had what was called a pay as well, but it was like kind of similar to an allowance. And we would have weeks where we wouldn't get paid because the orgs wouldn't pay, and our horses would be starving, so we'd have to like everybody donate money in this hat to try to get hay for the horses. So there was such neglect for the animals, for us, and like there's a point in the book where I don't have shoes. So all of these bare necessities were always on the back burner until it like became very obvious that someone needed something. And I don't know what it was where they decided to take me to the eye doctor. It might have been when we would watch movies. I was like this close to, I would always have to be in the front, like squinting at the screen. And they're like, why is she squinting when she's right up against the TV? um, but yeah, and it's very sad. So like my mother and my dad, I wonder how they're doing because they both are in their 70s now, and that it's a known thing that they don't do well with going to the doctor and taking care of people. So yeah.
The situation around your finances was particularly stressful to read about, especially considering you're a child without the direct support of your parents, separated from your family, being thrown into these roles where you have to act like an adult or take on the responsibilities of acting like an adult with things like manual labor and working in massive kitchens to feed tons and tons of people. And the situation around the incorrect age plays into the difficulties in you accessing finances to support yourself with bare necessities like toiletries and underwear and socks. And I wondered if you could just talk the listeners through your experience through the whole finding out that you were a year older than you thought you were.
Yes. Yeah, so I call my mother and I'm like, "I'm so excited. It's my birthday. I'm turning 9." She's like, "No, you're turning 10." And I'm just flabbergasted. I'm like, "I am not turning 10." She's like, "No, you're turning 10. Like you're already 9." She's like, "You're born August 4th, 1985." I'm like, "My birthday's August 5th." So she's like getting another fact wrong on top of it. She's like, "Oh, sorry. I started in labor on August 4th." I was like, "Okay, fine, whatever." So even from that, because of that confusion of my age, so I lost a year of my life is what it felt like, which was really hard. And my peers, who I thought I was on the young end of my friends, now I was one of the older ones. And at that age, as everybody knows, it's so important, like how old you are. And part of that, like you're talking about with the pay and the financials, like I didn't have a social security number, and we would be get paid, which was registered with the government, which is wild too, that they like that these children are all getting these paychecks. And it was about $15, 13 some after FICA was taken out. I still don't even really know what FICA is. And that's something for the government. And then I stopped getting it because I didn't have a social security number. And they just never filed for one. So then it was another year or two. And meanwhile, all my friends are getting paid and I don't have any money. My parents aren't sending me money really, or rarely, or I'm writing letters. I need shoes. So I was under extra neglect on top of being neglected, which was just bad luck. But well, also poor. Like my parents should have gotten me a social security number.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And those sporadic interactions that you would manage to have with your parents when you'd phone them and hope that they would pick up and be able to talk, or they would phone you and you'd have to run to get to the phone before they had
Yeah.
to hang up, and you'd hear that they were on site wherever you were located at the time, and you'd manage to have those small interactions and just be like, have you got any money you can give me? I need these things. Can you help me? And sometimes they'd have a few dollars on them, and sometimes they wouldn't. And it was really tough to read those parts of the book. And I don't know how you feel about it now, because I suppose that's all you knew when you were growing up. But as a parent yourself now, do you reflect on young Catherine and have any thoughts and feelings about those situations?
Yeah, I mean, I look back and I'm sad that my parents didn't have the wherewithal to pay more attention to me and that they felt everything was fine. They literally thought everything was fine. And um it's sad that I was ashamed for myself, even though it was not my responsibility. Like I was embarrassed that I didn't have shoes, or I at one point had only one pair of underwear and I get teased by my friends for it. But and in the way I look back and I'm like, "Oh man, that sucks," but it also doesn't really weigh on me. Like, I don't know, I it wasn't my responsibility, so
Yeah.
I don't, like, dwell on it now in the present, and I definitely make sure my children have what they need, that's for sure, though.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And
Yeah.
during those moments where you are struggling in the book, it's fascinating to read the typical interactions that you have with other kids that I can remember having when I was at school with other kids my age. So you have these beautiful moments of carefree fun and messing around with other kids, spraying each other with hoses, laughing around, falling on the floor. There are a few really great friends in the book that lend you shoes, that lend you a bike, gives you a bike when they move away. And then there's the other side of that where kids can be mean and nasty and tease. They go through your diary at one point. So even in this high control environment, there are still these moments that you're able to capture in your book of children being children. And at the end of the book, you reveal that you're still in touch with some of those people that you grew up with. And I just wondered if you could explain to us what it was like to live with a group of children, to grow up with those children that are around the same age as you.
Yeah, I love that you noticed that because that was a big question of what I had in my book. Like, I felt it was important to capture what it's really like to be as a child, and that includes the joyful moments. Even though you could say, "Oh, I grew up in the Sea Org," it's horrible, but we're all children, and children can find joy wherever they are. And it can be dark, but it also could be happy. And there's a lot of silly moments where I'm like, "Oh, I want to ask out this boy," and sometimes I wondered when I was gonna write this book or when it's coming out, I'm like, "Oh gosh, some people are really gonna hate it because it's got a lot of the frivolous stuff." This is just, the doubt as a writer when you doubt yourself. But I thought, I was like, I want to tell my full story of my arc as a child and growing up in Scientology. So I kept all that in. So I love that you love that. Um, and all of my friends, so we all grew up together. It there is something strangely magical about how we all were when I look back at that time because we were there was like no adults. So we were in these dorms and it was children my age around within a year or two difference. So there's like a lot of hanging out and talking and chatting, and like when it's PE time, we lay around in the dorm and look at magazines instead of exercising and like, sneak out back and go on the horses, go on horseback rides. And there's a chapter that I cut out. I had to cut out a lot of stuff. So I did end up cutting some of the children's stuff, but once, me and my friends went bareback horseback riding, and it's out DWP, which is Department of Water and Power, was had property right behind our ranch up in the mountains. So it would go for miles and there'll be nothing, no houses.
Wow.
It's just gorgeous. And we decide to gallop back. You're not supposed to do that on horses because they go really, really fast because they want to get home. And my horse just like collides with another horse of my friends, and I go flying off and like fly onto the other horse next to me and then fall off of that horse, and then the other horse jumps over me. Like I totally could have died, but it was like a crazy adventure. And then I just have to walk back to the ranch. Like we we catch the horses and we like walk back with the reins. One of them ran off. But it's like these crazy adventures like that. There would be other times when we would like go like rollerblading down the mountainside on the road, just like free, like boom, like really going at it. And if like a car came around the corner, I'm like talking about dangerous situations, but they were really fun and nobody got hurt, luckily. But
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I
there's
love
a
those
lot of
moments.
yeah, there was a lot of that. And even though, so with that though, you would also have, and I think this is normal in some sense, the tattletales, but in the Sea Org, if you like notice something wrong, you have to write it up. So it's the same at the ranch. So you would have your friends that you trusted, and then the friends that you knew would like tattletale on you if you did anything bad. So I think I try to capture that too, like the ones who are like very upstats and role followers, and me who's not. Like I'm always trying to like see what I can get away with.
Yes,
And
yes. I
thinking that I'm
love
still
that.
upstat though. That was the funny part. I
Yeah,
always was like,
yeah.
"What? Everybody does this."
Yeah, so still thinking that you were keeping to the rules and playing by the book and finding little loopholes, and it's just I love those moments that are also in tandem extremely frustrating, where you have this moment of clarity and think, this is it, I don't want to do this anymore, I'm not good at it, I'm bringing everyone else down, I might as well just go. And then you'll have a conversation with somebody where you'll either feel re-inspired or re-motivated to try again, or in spite of them you're like, well, I'll just do it the way you think I can't do it, and then we're back to kind of being in that environment. But there's so many moments where you're on a trajectory and then you're brought back in, and I feel like I hear that so many times in these conversations that I have with people on the show. But the frivolous parts
Mhm.
that are in the book that you mentioned, I love that. I I bring to attention as much as I can the purity culture that exists in so many of these different groups that are explored, where people are told not to talk about sex, people don't learn about sex, people don't learn or encompass, embrace the LGBT community. There's so many things that are just pushed down and squashed in these groups. And teenagers go through all of these developmental stages, these raging hormones, these changes in chemistry, attraction to people. And I've never read a memoir from written from the perspective of a child into a teenager that is going through those motions in the way that you wrote it. Because I
Mhm.
remember being around my friendship groups and everyone having their first kiss and being like, oh my goodness. And you
Yeah.
captured those moments of growing up so well. I love those parts of the book. So I'm so glad you kept them in.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I thought it was important too. And my friend who read it, who was mentioned in my acknowledgments, was the one who was like, you managed to capture what I was like as a child, but you're growing and up in a cult. So it's like I could
Yeah.
see myself where you are, which was really cool to hear because
Yeah.
that's what I didn't want it to just be like a cardboard figure growing up. Here's what happened to me. March, march, march. Like, here's all the steps. It's like, what was I emotionally going through and how am I feeling? And even like choices when I decide to join the Sea Org or rejoin, like I failed to go in the Sea Org once because I was too out ethics, which means too naughty. And then when they're trying to get me to go back, I only choose to go back because there's a hot guy on the EPF. Like these are what teenagers do. We make horrible choices based on superficial reasons because that's how we feel. And like that was how I was. Like I was very um what would make me happy in the moment, and also, oh, I guess it helps the group if I do it too. Like that's the
Yeah.
side benefit. Yeah.
I feel as though a lot of people must have those mechanisms and thoughts though. What can I do right now that will help me in this situation? Whether that's help me feel better or help me um stay more in ethics, things that will help you either progress or stay out of trouble or out of the hot water. And sometimes it can be something as small as a handsome guy, or
Mhm.
getting a position that might pay a little bit more money, or hearing from your peers that have moved on to the Sea Org how amazing it is and how you have to be here, and then feeling again re-inspired that maybe this is what I want to do. There's so many parts that are explored in the Bad Cadet that just give all of those moments, and it's brilliant, as I said at the start, to get that insight from somebody who doesn't know too much about Scientology, to have all of these things broken down. But you grow up as a cadet in the cadet org, and you have your siblings around you sporadically, as you do with your parents, but you have a little bit more of an opportunity to connect with them when you're in the same space. Do you remember much about how your siblings felt about Scientology when they were growing up, and whether they still feel that way now?
Mhm. So I was the youngest, and then it was Jason, who's Judson in the book, and then I have my 2 oldest in the book. I'm like, what did I give them for their names? Anyway, I have an older brother and a older sister, and I'm protecting their privacy by not giving their real names. But the one who's closest in age to me, he's out of the Sea Org and Scientology. And it makes sense because in the book, he's the one I'm closest with. We talk about leaving when I'm 12 and he's 14. We have these conversations, which come to realize as I talk to my cadets that are all out now, and we talk about the past. These conversations that I was having was not normal. Like, I was definitely an unusual case in the Sea Org, and there was a few others probably like me too. But for me to be honest with myself and have these conversations, like, they were never having those conversations about
Mm-hmm.
wanting to leave. So Jason was having those conversations with me, and he actually is gay, and we grew up in a homophobic environment, and I didn't know that when we were growing up. And there's a moment in the book where I wonder, and people wonder about it because he likes to do dancing with the girls and make up dances to Ace of Base and like all that. Um, but he's also really popular with the guys and he plays sports. So I was like, he can't be. It's because, stereotypes. But and L. Ron Hubbard considers gay people perverts, basically, is how he defines them, which is really messed up. So I was like, oh, there's no way, because my brother is not a pervert. He's like the best. Um, so coming in the second book, I do have a second book that will be coming in a couple of years called The Bad Scientologist. Thank you. And that will follow that journey of my brother as he comes out eventually. My reaction, which is not good, I will admit. And because I grew up, I was scared for him, but my reaction was selfish in the way that I was just, I don't know, like I didn't think about what he needs. Anyway, you will read all about that down the road. But he moved here to Minneapolis. It's where I live. So we see each other. I just saw him yesterday and we're really close. And my other 2 siblings who are older, they were always rule followers. Always, always. I was close with them, but I was not very connected with them. So my sister, who is 44 now, is still in the Sea Org. And I'm like, please come out. She has disconnected from me and doesn't talk to me. Um, and unfortunately, my other brother passed away in his like mid 20s. Yeah.
Oh,
So
wow.
yeah, but he was a sweetheart, and but a big he would have still been in the Sea Org, and I think he would have disconnected from me if he was alive too, unfortunately, because he would have thought it was the right thing to do. But um yeah.
That is the end of part 1 of this mini-series on the Cadet Org. To find out more from Catherine, and for links to find a copy of her memoir, you can follow the links in the episode description. And to get in touch with me, you can find me at cultvaultpodcast@gmail.com, or follow me on Twitter and Instagram at cultvaultpod. I'm your speaker, Casey, host of the Cult Vault Podcast.